So good morning. Welcome to The Real Deal's 11th Annual Showcase and Forum in New York. It is my pleasure for the first time to have a panel on construction. I must confess we've neglected that field a little bit, though it's a hunt. Over the next 2 years, it's projected to have $150 billion in spending in New York City. However, we've always focused on the men and women who conceive of these projects, and then the men and women who sell these projects. Very little attention so far, at least on our end, has been paid to the men and women who build these projects. So we're really grateful to have you all here, and we're going to have about a 45-minute discussion, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm sure there are many. The construction industry isn't short of drama, so there's a lot going on. It's also a really important way of understanding how projects get built in New York City. I'm Hiten Samtani. I'm the editorial director at The Real Deal, and welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming. Let's get a round of applause for you for coming. Thank you. And I'll introduce the panel. So on my extreme right is John Banks. John is the president of the Real Estate Board of New York. It's an organization, a trade group that represents over 17,000 members of New York City's $1 trillion plus construction industry. John also has some acting credits to his fame. He was a star in a high school rendition of Grease and Godspell. So, John, thank you for being with us.
For the record, I was on a stage crew. I never was an actor.
To his left is Gary LaBarbera. Gary is the president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York. It's an organization that comprises affiliates of 15 national and international unions representing over 100,000 workers in New York City. So Gary has his hands in all the projects, pretty much every major project in New York. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
On his left is Jay Badami. Jay is the president and COO of AECOM Tishman, which according to The Real Deal's most recent ranking is the most active construction firm in New York. In the last year, between April 2017 and April 2018, the firm filed over 2 million square feet of permits. So that's a lot of building. So Jay, thank you for being with us. His projects, I was looking at the list of projects and it's mind-boggling. You have something in Dubai, which is where I'm from as well, but in New York you've got One World Trade Center, One Vanderbilt, the Baccarat Hotel and Residences, and you've just started pre-development work on JP Morgan's 270 Park Avenue. So thanks for being with us. On his left, I asked him if he would keep the mustache for this panel, and he obliged, so I appreciate it, is Lou Coletti. Lou is the president of the Building Trade Employers Association. That is the country's largest contractor organization, representing over 1,800 union construction managers, GCs, and subcontractors in New York. So gentlemen, thank you for being here. We're doing this panel at an exciting time in the market. It's certainly a market now defined by a shift. New York was traditionally a union town. You couldn't do a project left or right without having, being essentially working with the unions. That has quickly been changing. Now there's some estimates that non-union work accounts for about 35% in projects in Manhattan. It's still a smattering of large, small and medium-sized projects, but increasingly there's been more and more non-union activity in bigger projects. So Gary, why don't we start with you? What is your take on non-unions sort of growing presence in New York City? Do you think this is a lasting trend? Do you think the unions can sort of stop that flow, or just get your thoughts on that?
Thank you very much. So it's a very interesting question about trends. So first let me say that in the construction industry, for those of us that have been in the industry for many, many years, decades, there's always been a segment of the industry that has been non-union, or there's been non-union construction, and primarily in the residential sector. The industry in and of itself has grown exponentially. So all, whether it's union or non-union projects, and union or non-union workers, everything has gone up. So in terms of percentages, I would disagree with you on your percentages, but I don't want to get into that debate unless we have to. But the reality is that as the union sector has grown, so has the non-union sector, because the industry in itself has grown. What we see more than what I would call non-union, and some say it is non-union, but what we see really in particular in the residential And that's primarily where it is. There is some infiltration in some commercial fit-out, but primarily in the residential sector of the industry, which accounts for less than a third of the industry. What you really see now is open shop projects, and that's really what I think the shift is. But one of the things I have to say is that, you know, in recognition of that shift in terms of open shop projects, the trade unions themselves have all made, or the majority of, I will say, have all made significant adjustments. And what we are finding is that from hours being reported in terms of certain market sectors, is we're actually seeing where the unions can, number one, be competitive, and we're actually seeing more market share in traditionally open shop, non-union sector of the market, which is a positive sign. The reality is that it's really about being competitive. I don't think anyone, and this is not to, disparage anyone, but I don't think there is really any question that even now, the quality and skill levels from the unionized construction industry are superior than that of the non-union. That is a fact. And so it depends on what a developer and owner's priorities are. Years ago, many developers developed projects, and they held those projects for that was their strategy. For those were projects, buildings that they held for long-term investment and investment return. Today, many construction projects are really financial transactions. So
you're saying buy, build, cash out quickly, so
right,
quality isn't
right.
as
So the theory is that we're going to build at the lowest possible common denominator, and that's one of the factors that are going into this equation. However, having said that, what we know for a fact is that while the pressure in the residential sector is definitely there. There's no question about it. What we know is that we can be competitive. And so essentially, we also know that in the non-union, I'm going to be quiet because there's a lot of people, we also know on the non-union side, those numbers are going up quite a bit. So the delta is continuing to close between union and non-union. And then it ultimately comes down to, if it's purely based on a business decision, and I'm sure John and Jay and Lou can talk to this, is what the developer or owner of a project really wants out of that project.
Well, let's challenge that. You essentially said it is a fact that union construction is higher quality and safer. John, do you think that's true across the board? It's been a given for a long time, but I think non-unions are probably looking at some of the factors that keep them out of the running and are working to address them.
So I wouldn't agree that non-union open shop workers are less competitive, and less safe. I think what Gary alluded to is, in fact, an important distinction to be drawn. On the residential side, there's been a much more dramatic shift from union to non-union than on the commercial side. So 10 years ago, it was 70% union, 30% non-union. That number has flipped. And a large portion of the reason behind that was in 2008, when the recession took place, and lots of folks lost their jobs, they went to work for non-union employment. And that did two things. One, they found that the delta between their take-home pay and their, when they were in a non-union shop versus when they were in a union shop was not as dramatic as you would have thought. And then two, there was a huge skills transfer that allowed the non-union segment to begin to build different types of construction. So it used to be deck and plank, and now it's looking at, steel and formed concrete. So there's been a shift in skills that has allowed that. On the commercial side, it's not been nearly as dramatic, but there's not a big leap that you need to make to be able to build a high-rise residential building and a high-rise commercial. Now, if you talk about safety, when you look at safety, the real problem in the industry, and this is one of the challenges that we had with the city council legislation, the really unsafe jobs are those under 10 stories. And in particular, if you look, it's under 6 stories, which tend to be non-union in and of themselves. If you look at 10 stories, well, they tend to be union, and they also tend to be much safer because the demands on the builder are much more rigorous. And so we thought that the focus of the legislation was not directed in the manner that it should have been. We worry about the number of people who could get trained. And these are all factors that contribute to the level of safety. I don't think there's, I know with great certainty, there's nobody on this stage who argue against greater safety training for anybody. The question is how much and how frequently and over what period of time.
So do you think the 40-hour mandate is misguided, the way that it's presented at the moment?
There's a bunch of problems we have with local law 196. The amount of training in and of itself is not problematic. It's the time frame in which you have to get that amount of training that is problematic. There are only 22 certified training courses for non-union employees, and we estimate that there are as many as 30 to 40,000 non-union employees who will be subject to the training, and we worry very much how are those folks who are working today come come December of this year, when the new requirements kick in, how will they be able to continue to work because they don't have the capacity to do the training, and many of the unaffiliated non-union construction workers don't have the resources to pay for it themselves. So safety is important. We put forward legislation that we thought would provide the same level of training over a longer period of time and get everybody there over a greater period of time while the infrastructure developed.
Lou, let's get you in on that question as well. One of the concerns is who's going to pay for this training, right? The unions have a mechanism to make that happen. How do the non-unions get to the level they need to be? Who's paying for that training? What sort of issues have come up when you're dealing with your contractors, and what have you seen?
Well, you know, we have to do some training also, so it's just not the non-union people have to be trained. But who should pay for it?
Put your mic up.
The contractor should pay for it. That's who should pay for it, okay? If they can't invest and find the way to invest in their own workforce, and we do it, we pay for it, it's one of the reasons that we maybe cost a little more. And how do our members, how does Gary's workforce get trained? After work, they go to school 2 or 3 nights a week, or they go on Saturdays and don't get paid and get trained. So I think there's a legitimate issue that John brought up in terms of how many training providers there are, but I think DOB has enough flexibility in the law in terms of extending that date. But to me, the bottom line is those contractors don't want to pay. And the taxpayer should not have to subsidize training of their workforce. We made this point over and over to the administration, and to the council. There were 3 principles we said. We did not get involved in determining what the level, how many hours should be required, but we believe that every individual should receive some minimum basic trainings. And number 2 was the contractor should pay for it. And number 3, the buildings department has to be given enough resources to enforce it, because without the ability to enforce it, this was all a big waste of time.
Jay, let's get you in. You'd mentioned a little while ago that if a non-union shop gets and builds successfully a 3 million square foot office project, it's game over for the unions. Do you stand by that? What have you seen in terms of the bidding process so far? Are they being taken more seriously?
So I took a lot of heat for that question. God, you want to finish your question?
No, I just wanted to also add that the construction industry seems in the next couple of years to be shifting to bigger commercial projects. The share of dollars that are going to residential in 2018 and 2019 seems to be dropping a little bit, and there's going to be more commercial projects happening. So it's a pertinent question for now.
I think, you know, you can see the condo market is relatively flat. That's not a secret, which means more people are building rentals. The commercial office building sector, Class A, seems to be where the market is going. And I made that statement at the Union League. Wasn't referencing any particular project. And basically it meant that if you have a super tall, which is anything over 983 feet, that primarily would be done union, because a developer who is going to the world for financing will need a guarantee from people like me to build their project. They have to go to the bank. We can put up corporate guarantees, P&P bonds. They have to put up completion guarantees. So for a developer who needs a guarantee on his project, he has to do the job. Anything of the 3 million square feet or above 1 million or 2 million. 3 was just a note that I mentioned in a meeting. But if you're a developer and you have a balance sheet and you don't need a guarantee from your contractor, then you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. but the vast majority of institutions who are building these large office buildings have to go, and they need a guarantee from people like me. So in those cases, those jobs will be done under a project labor agreement, likely. We'll negotiate terms, or if a developer just goes on his own, then he can do what he wants. So that was really the statement that was made. As far as the residential market, the majority of that work is going open shop. Some are 100% non-union, but as far as the quality, the foundations on these jobs are primarily union anyway. The superstructure, now that the interest rates are up there, the cycle of union contractors on superstructure work is quicker, so speed to market. Curtain wall. So there are certain trades that will continue to be union, and on some of the interior finish trades, whether it's tile, whether it's paint, whether it's carpentry, that's going to be a mixed bag. That's how the industry is going looking forward.
But don't you think the non-unions might follow the dollars into the commercial market, figure out how to make those relationships, figure out how to gain those specialization, if you want to?
Well, there's no doubt that they'll attempt to do that. I mean, obviously they'll attempt to do that. But I think Jay hit it on the head. The reality is that when you get into, in particular, Class A commercial development, the risk is much higher. I will tell you that when I talk to developers that are looking to develop or even significant renovations, because, you know, with all the competition, there was a lot of interior renovation. They want to have union contractors, in particular in the mechanical trades, in those buildings. They do not want to run that risk. And we've seen on some projects actually where, you know, some developers have attempted to do some non-union work, and they've had to bring in, particularly in the mechanical trades, they had to bring in union trades to finish the work because of what Jay pointed out. So, I mean, I think the important point is that when we look at, see, because I want to be very honest with everyone in the room, that, you know, unfortunately there's an attempt, or there is this false narrative when we say, oh, it's 70-30. I don't know that that's an exact number, and I think it's very hard to get the exact number. What I will say is, and it is a characteristic of being honest, is we know that in the residential sector there is definitely an issue with non-union or open shop. But what I think is an important comment to make is that when you break down the three sectors of construction in the industry, residential, non-residential, and then what you would call governmental. So non-residential is, you know, institutional work, commercial work. You know, all reality is that on our market share analysis, you know, New York City, when you said a union town, over 70% of construction workers in the city are union construction workers of one of the trades. That's a very strong number. It's stronger here than in most parts of the country. So, you know, we do believe New York City is a union town. But what I'm going to say is that I can tell you there's some leaders in the room from the unions here today, and they know it, and they're doing things. We recognize that where there are areas that we need to compete, we need to figure out a better way of competing. And I think that is going to actually have, over time, a very significant impact on the industry in particular in the residential.
But is there, when a dispute arises, like the one that we're thinking about now, which is very much in the news, is the one at Hudson Yards with Related and some of the groups that you represent, can that not be counterproductive to have, you have a company, the biggest developer in the city, you are publicly challenging them in a way that, you know, is playing out in the press, and there's been a lot of back and forth. What's to stop Related from saying, okay, after this experience, I don't see the point of going this way. I don't see the point of playing ball in this way. Their argument, and I'm sure you'll have yours, is that the PLAs aren't necessarily being honored. And there's been obviously disputes about coffee boys and many other things. But don't you think a situation like that can work out, can backfire for your people?
Gary, if I want to respond to something you said a little bit earlier. Part of what we are all talking about here is the bottom line and how you make a project fiscally able to be done, right? And if the unions could make some changes, and some have, and I think Hudson Yards is a great example. I think over 90% of the jobs are union there, right? The fight is really over the margins and how people can and some unions in particular need to change the way they do business, as Gary alluded to, in order to be more competitive. And if they do that, then they will continue to hold their market share and eventually build it. No one is disputing that there is some of an advantage to having a union person. And my guys and Relators are a great example. The largest construction job in the country, and it's 90% union. So it's not that there is a bias against union. It's being allowed to have an open competitive process where the unions compete for the jobs against the open shop providers. And in that process, may the best person win that job. And again, it's something that's happening now and will continue to happen.
So if that understanding is there between you and your constituents and you and your constituents, why are we in a situation like we are at Hudson Yards?
I don't have any insight. This one I'll let Gary answer.
No, you know what? If you won't mind, I'd like to talk about that because that's the elephant in the room. You know, I've been in this business for 31 years.
If you could put your
okay, and I think what I'm watching and listening to, there are organizations out there like the Associated Builders and Contractors, like the anti-union group, who are focused on the MTA as sort of an appendage to this discussion, that are running some of the most vile, disrespectful, personal attacks that I've ever seen in my life. We don't need to have this dialogue going on in that environment, or an environment where we've got personal lawsuits going back and forth, where we've got men and women calling developers names. Okay, that's not a pathway to try to get us to where we all want to go. Which, okay, in fact, it includes more impediments. And I think we have to stop it, all sides, and get back to the table, because we all want the same thing. We want to build a quality job. We want to build it safely. We want to offer it to the consumer at a cost-effective price. And we all want to make a little money, all of us. That's the common theme. By driving and having this dialogue in the press every day about rats falling all over people sitting in the city, for people who have very little presence in this city, okay? To me, we've got to get beyond that, because there are solutions, and some of the trades have made changes. I mean, the BTA is an organization, all of our members are signed to collective bargaining agreements, all of them. And it's because we believe it's the best way to build. But our mission as an organization is to make sure that the contractor has the ability to manage their own business. And this is an evolving marketplace. So none of that is inconsistent. So if you don't mind me, then I'll be quiet. I want to read you a quote. I don't know, did any of you see Darkest Hour with Winston Churchill?
Sure.
Okay.
Quote, all right.
I read his quote at the end of the movie, which I think sums up what the BTA's position is in terms of this debate. And he said,
this is a first for us, so I hope you guys feel lucky.
Churchill, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And that's what we're going to do, project by project, collective bargaining agreement by collective bargaining agreement, in terms of making sure and trying to get every trade to be competitive. That's our philosophy.
So Gary, again, I want to interrupt you.
I want to answer the question.
Yeah, you can. But I want to say, listen, Gary and I have known each other for a few years. I find him a man of integrity. He stands up and advocates on behalf of his people as hard as he can. You know, we both get attacked regularly from fringe groups. As Lou said, it's not part of what we're doing or why we're doing it. And it would be great if it were to go away, but it's, you know, this is New York, and it happens. It's part of what we have to deal with in the environment. But, you know, I am not shy about thanking Gary for his service to his members and saying that, you know, anybody who would impugn his integrity just doesn't know the man.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. That means a great deal to me. Thank you, John. Thank you very much, John. That means a great deal to me. Thank you. So I would like to just kind of give, I mean, every comment that was made.
Then I'm going to attack him.
Then I got to attack you back. Not today. So, well, that's kind of, so let me just kind of answer your question, and I'm going to be obviously very careful in what I say, because I don't want to get sued a third time. So, So everyone kind of thinks like, what happened at the Hudson Yards? What happened? What caused this? So on the first phase, we entered into a project labor agreement with Related, and it was probably the most progressive agreement that we ever entered into with any developer. And it was done because of the scope and size of that project.
Sorry, just to clarify, by progressive you mean in terms of savings?
In terms of the savings, yeah, okay. And, you know, Jay could speak to this. I would never put words in, but you know, for his role, Tishman's role in overseeing the reunion construction that's going on, is going on uninterrupted on phase one, I can only say that it's a stellar project. It is an outstanding project, all the way from the management down to the workers. It's a great project. What happened was, for some reason, when it came to second phase and to 55 and 50 Hudson, which are large jobs, Related made a decision, we don't know really why, to basically take the position that certain trades we no longer want to deal with. And that's what's been kind of reported in the press, that certain trades, the trades that have skill, we know we need, we want to use those, but some trades we just no longer want to deal with. We don't know what the rationalization was. Later on, through litigation, which I was sued personally, and the building trades was sued as well, there's this basis that you mentioned, coffee boys, etc. The project labor agreement was signed in 2012. Litigation is in 2018. In the project labor agreement, there is very clear and unambiguous grievance language. If there was a grievance, if there was any concerns that the PLA was not being lived up to, Related had every right to bring that to an arbitrator and to go through its obligations under the PLA to enforce terms that they didn't think were being lived up to. That never happened. So the question is, how did it get here, you know, so fast?
At the protest, the theater.
Right, how did it get here so fast? Really what had happened, in my opinion, was, and I think the opinion of the building trades, is the building trades felt very betrayed because of the leap of faith that we took with Related and entered into these agreements that went beyond anything else, only to be rewarded at the end of that project with the position that some of the trades I just don't want to deal with anymore, rather than going through, if there were problems, going through the appropriate channels of the PLA. You know, we have disagreements, unions have disagreements every day with contractors or maybe even with developers, and it has never gotten to this point. We work things out. Sometimes we prevail, sometimes they prevail, but there is a process that is in place that we all utilize. And in this case, in our opinion, this was a major push by a major developer to really drive the open shop model. And again, the unions themselves, we were taken back by the fact that we entered into this in good faith. We had no knowledge there were any problems, and all of a sudden it was this attack on certain unions, if I could say it that way, because it was like pushing them to the side. That ignited, frankly, just let me finish, that ignited something's probably been the best thing for the building trades in the last 25 years, the rank and file movement, to say basically we've had enough. You know, we're not going to be taken advantage of. We're not going to be used and pushed to the side. And you know, that original campaign, the Count Me In campaign, which is getting a lot of attention nationally, started with 50 guys and women on a corner at 34th and 10th. You know, last week there were over 15,000 at a rally, and it's at 6 months. It's only growing. So, you know, to everyone's point, to Lou's point, we can't let this get to a point where it's irrational, and it's going in that direction with litigation and everything else, suing me personally. That is not the rational way of, that's only going to each other's corners. I have said every time publicly that the building trades are prepared to sit down and negotiate and discuss all of the issues and concerns that Related has. You have a business manager here from Local 580 of the ironworkers. They do all the curtain wall. You have a business manager of IUPAT. It's all the painters. There's other carpenters. There's other trades in the room. I say it unabashed. That is our position. That has been our position all along, that we are always prepared and ready to go down, and whatever the issues are, we're prepared to negotiate and try to reach an agreement.
I do want to ask one follow-up, and then we'll move on beyond this dispute. But what Related has said recently is we're not going to negotiate with Gary anymore. We're going to negotiate directly with the unions. Do you not feel like this position may have put your group at risk in terms of the discussion?
No, I mean, that's when I said to you about a level in this case where there are irrational positions and it's become very personal for them, and I don't understand why. But that's their choice. The other thing is that, you know, if they're going to try to go, or they want to go to each individual union, you know, they don't have collective bargaining agreements with anyone. The contractors do. And this is a whole nother question. So the question is, do they really have the capacity to negotiate terms, just listen, that modify a collective bargaining agreement when they're outside of the collective bargaining agreement? The legal way, the lawful way a union can modify terms, which what I'm saying is giving additional concessions, is only through a project labor agreement if it's outside of the employer, contractor, union collective bargaining process. So, you know, they can talk all they want, but the reality is there's laws that cover collective bargaining. And again, if they are, you know, looking to, and they want to resolve this, we're prepared to sit down and negotiate, certainly. But to try to single out an individual like they've done here, I mean, that's, like I say, I've been doing this for 25 years as a labor leader. I've never really come across anything like this, which is very unfortunate. It really is an irrational position. So, you know, again, we're ready to go to the table, or we're ready to continue doing what we're doing.
I appreciate your honesty. I know there's litigation ongoing, so I appreciate you speak. John.
That's just an overview. I don't want to speak to the litigation. I had no knowledge about it. But I think one of the phenomena that you're seeing with the project labor agreements is the development community doesn't think that they're getting the benefit out of them that they thought they were going to get. And that is a function of many different things. One of the, I think, precipitating events was, you know, there was a project labor agreement unrelated, and then through a series of unexplained reasons, one of the signatories to the PLA went out on strike. One of the things that my members, always thought there was a benefit was preventing people walking off the job if they signed a project labor agreement. Even if they didn't realize the level of savings that they anticipated, at a very minimum you got the benefit of nobody walking off the job. And when that particular union walked off the job, it precipitated, I think, part of what Gary is talking about. And there is, if the only reason to do, if one of the major reasons for doing a PLA was to have a no strike clause, and then the no strike clause doesn't work, then people start to question the judgment behind the PLA agreement.
All right. Jay, I want to bring you in, and just on a more general level, this is obviously union by union, this is a case-by-case thing, but in general, are unions doing what they need to do to be more economically competitive? Are you seeing that gap shrink? When people are making decisions about which way to go, money is probably top of mind, money and safety, you would say. Are they doing what they need to do, and what else needs to be done?
I think some are and some aren't. I'm not going to single them out, but I think on a broad brush, and years ago, you know, my company came to me and said, we're doing away with defined benefits as part of a pension. We're going to defined contribution. And we reluctantly said, okay, we have to do that because if we want to remain competitive in the industry, I can no longer have the employer contributing to my pension. So the things that the private sector has done have to be done on the union side. It's usually a difficult conversation, but you can have legacy pensions which owners ultimately are paying for, where the non-union trades don't have to pay for. So the disparity in the trades is not just at the wage level, it's at the benefit level. It's where the political action committee contributions go to the unions, and quite honestly, a lot of developers challenge that because they say, then I am paying you to then ultimately use your money against me. And again, the non-union trades don't have that. So the wage is not the issue. You're never going to have exact parity between the unions and non-unions. It's just not possible. If a union trade is going to bid against a non-union, probably a couple of them will be relatively flat. But in most cases, the union numbers are going to be higher. It's never going to be the same. But, you know, in discussions with Redney years ago, if there's a differential, and the differential was always 10% on the cost of construction, that developers would want to go to unions. That's the way it was. So a rising tide does lift all boats, so the fact that the union wages are high, the non-union wages are creeping up, but the unions have to look in the mirror and say, what are they paying? And owners have an issue paying pension funds for people who are not working anymore because the non-union guys don't have that. So a legacy steam fitter who's not working is being paid from an hourly rate based on what a pension is today. So those are the issues that really have to be dealt with. That's the elephant in the room. It's not the wage of the man. It's the benefits, it's the work rules, and Gary certainly knows we've been talking about these for years. Until we have a dialogue between the unions, the contractors, the trade contractors, to say what is preventing you from being competitive, because it's difficult to get people in the room because nobody wants to talk about the stuff that is tough to talk about. But those are the issues. If the union industry is going to succeed, they have to look in the mirror and do what the private sector is doing.
Lou, I want to get your take on this as well. In terms of being economically competitive, are the unions doing what they need to be doing?
Well, I'm going to echo what Jay and Gary have said. There are a number of the trades that have become economically competitive, and that's why you've seen the growth in the open shop market. Union, non-union for my members is really not that big a incursion into our market. And so what we have now is the union trades who have made the changes are competitive, and they win the job because the developer knows I'm going to get a safe job, I'm going to get a quality job, I'm going to get excellent project management, which is the part that nobody else talks about that much. You cannot compare, in my opinion, the project management expertise and experience of BTA contractors compared to any open shop or non-union shop. Doesn't compare. The challenge we have is, unfortunately, since the recession, too many people, we have become a commodity. And there is a difference. So when those prices start to shrink down by the trades that have made the changes, and they know they can get better project management, I've heard stories. I'll tell you a story I just heard the other day. One of my roofing contractors called me and told me he just opened up a maintenance company because he's getting an unbelievable amount of calls from some of the residential buildings built, I'll say non-union, open shop, but his trade was not there. The roofs leak, they're not straight. He opened up an entirely new company with his union members just to do maintenance. So, and part of the growth of the open shop has been because those, again, signatory GCs and CMs who are not signatory to one agreement are hiring to a large degree union subcontractors. So we need to accelerate the pace to get all the trades on board. That is a process that happens on a project-by-project basis. That happens on every collective bargaining agreement. We just don't sit around and say, well, the agreement's not, we've got a 3-year term, we'll wait for 3 years. That happens on every single job because my members would like to build with 100% building trade unions, but it has to be economically feasible. And Jay's on the phone and his estimators calling every union subcontractor, get up here, give me a bid, you're 10% too high, go back and talk to your business manager and see what you can do. That happens every single day of the week on every single project.
On the residential side, though, because you've brought this up previously, we have a lot of brokers in the room. They're selling a lot of condo product. Are you seeing those defects get into new product based on some of these non-union jobs? Are you seeing a dramatic difference between the quality of non-union and union labor on some of these condo projects that these brokers are then going out and selling? Maybe it's something they should be aware of.
Yes, and I get that information not from the anecdotal stories that I hear from my members. I hear it from some developers that still talk to me. I hear it from their architects who got the complaints from the developers. To try to measure that, I can't estimate.
I've seen you at the Rebbe Gala, and you're talking to everyone, so I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. John, go ahead.
So I just want to echo what Jay said. The real rubber that needs to hit the road is on the benefit and the work route side. When you can attack that, then you see prices will come down, and the unions will become more competitive. The actual delta between the take-home salary of a union person and a non-union person, whatever the difference is, the big difference is in the benefits side of it, not the actual wage for the employee. And if that can be where the attack takes place, I think that would bear fruit. And Gary and I have talked about this so many times. You know, the industry is undergoing a fundamental change, and there are some people in the trades who have been more responsive to that reality, and there are others who have been less responsive to that reality. And if those who are less responsive were more honest with their members and say, for the way for us to survive and to grow is to just make a slight adjustment in this area, and we'll be able to win those jobs, and this issue will go away.
Thank you for that. We've kept politics out of it so far, so I want to have my last question before I turn it over to do with the governor's race. Gary, you had Governor Cuomo join you at the rally, and he spoke. He had some pretty strong words, you know, showing solidarity with your groups. We have a candidate now, Cynthia Nixon, who's come into the race. We had some developers describe her as a nightmare candidate for New York real estate. I don't know how much of that was just being dramatic, but what's your take on the governor's race? Is there another serious candidate out there besides Governor Cuomo? And what sort of positions have you seen?
Well, thank you for that. Well, first of all, I will tell this crowd and anyone else that I am an uncompromising, unabashed, ardent supporter of Governor Andrew Cuomo. There is no question about it. I have known the governor for many, many years. He's in my opinion, he's a champion for the middle class. He has created more equity in this state and in this city than any other governor. When you think about the minimum wage to $15 an hour, you think about paid family leave, you think about what he's done in terms of his very robust and bold vision for rebuilding the infrastructure of the state and the city. He's literally created tens of thousands of good union construction careers. I think, I've said it publicly, I think he is the greatest governor in the country today. And I'm not even going to comment on Cynthia Nixon. I can tell you that the New York City Building and Construction Trades Council unanimously and robustly endorsed the governor for governor. And I will tell you that of our goal is to help this governor get reelected in any way and measure possible. And we will, you know, you see 15,000 people in Union Square, you know, we'll have double that, and they will be in the street to get out the vote and to support and to vote for this governor. And, you know, that's where we're at in the building trades in New York City. We are 100% behind the governor, Andrew Cuomo.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, the BTA, while we don't do political endorsements, I will tell you that I echo Gary's remarks. I can't remember in my lifetime a governor that has made such a large commitment to building the transportation and infrastructure of this city, which is the key element to continuing the growth of the real estate market, which is so key to the future of this city. We wouldn't even consider, personally, there's no question, with Gary, just came back from Puerto Rico with him. He has the future of this city in mind from a job perspective, from what will make New York City and New York State grow for the next 10 to 15 years. And we haven't had somebody like that in a long time that has that vision, articulates a vision, and carries it out.
Fair enough. Unless someone else wants to go, I want to open it up to questions. I'll take a couple.
I'll take an opportunity to distinguish my comments somewhat. We don't do endorsements, so I don't have to take that. But I can say this, during the Affordable New York program that we negotiated with Gary, the old 421A, we would not have got that done without the governor's leadership, right? And it's because of his leadership and his willing to get in there and have his team work with us and put together a program that, certainly from our perspective, and I believe Gary would say as well, works for both of us, found that balance, and that was only because of the governor's team. So the governor is a New Yorker through and through. He fights for the state every day. The real estate industry has a strong relationship with the governor's office, and we look forward to continuing that.
It's a non-endorsement endorsement, but I'll take it.
That's why he's running Redney.
So the lady next to the pillar, and if you could, just my request is just ask one question and let it be a question. Thank you.
It's like a part A and part B. You mentioned...
You only have time for one. I am going to be...
Well, you mentioned
22
credits or courses that people were taking, whether it be union or non-union. Who determines which courses are being taken and what do they involve?
I believe that's
assuming you're talking about this construction safety. The short answer is Department of Buildings determines that.
That's correct.
Fair enough. Right there, gentleman with the glasses.
How are you? Just in regards to when you talked about the benefits and these legacy benefit packages, but there's a lot of pension dollars that are invested in these projects, right? Hudson Yards, billions. I'm sure if you add them all up throughout the city, you're talking trillions of dollars. So aren't the developers actually benefiting from actually paying those benefits and being able to pull back and use this money to help build some of these developments? So how would you subsidize that money if you were to remove these benefit packages?
I think the issue was how do union contractors compete with the non-union contractors? So it's under that vein. So you're not, if you have ULICO or you have AFL-CIO, if you have pension funds that are in some cases targeting, it still doesn't answer the question of how does the union become competitive with the non-union. This is strictly a conversation of what does the union industry have to do to become more competitive, and that's where I brought the issue up. Again, it's the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it. You're saying that. It's the benefits have to be redirected. It's not a wage, it's a benefit issue, and everybody's got to look at it. As a company, I had to look at mine. I had to make some difficult decisions to have my employees contribute to their pension. Because I could not continue to pay that, I'm going to be forced out of work. So this is just getting the unions to do what the private sector has had to do over the past 10 years. It's not been forever. We had defined benefits before that. It was great. But it doesn't work anymore under the model that we currently have, and it has given the union trades a disadvantage against the non-union trades.
So let me also make a comment. So look, there is arguments both sides, much deeper than we could get into today about ERISA and about legacy, quote-unquote, legacy plans. Let me just say this. I just want to make this comment before we break. I hope all of you saw one thing up here today. We have John Banks from Rebney representing the real estate developers in this city. You have Lou Coletti representing the contractors in this city, union contractors. You have Jay Badami undoubtedly representing the largest, or certainly one of the largest construction managers in the city, and myself representing the building trades. I hope you all take away from this the level of mutual respect and goodwill that has been shown in these discussions from all of us. The issues that are brought up are issues that the only way that you really get there is through collaboration and honest and open discussion, right? In a measured and responsible and mature way. And what I want to say is, for everyone leaving this, we touched on it, we shouldn't let this industry and it's, again, evidenced by the personal relationships and the working relationships be defined by what's happening on the west side of New York. That's really an anomaly between a developer and the unions right now, the construction unions. There is a strong relationship. You know, John and I just talked, so we need to get together for lunch. We want to talk about a lot of things. Lou, that there is a strong relationship here. And that is what I think has to prevail in the end, is that you have to have, on all these issues, whether it's discussions about work rules or feelings about how do we make benefits more competitive. I mean, these are very complicated issues, but the only way that those issues really get resolved is through collaboration of all the parties that are on this table and the willingness to collaborate. I know there's enough goodwill here. And I think that's, you know, these conversations are why it's important that John and I get together, and Lou and I and Jay and I, to continue the dialogue so I can go back to the leadership of the building trades and share what their concerns are and figure out ways that we can work together and collaboratively rather than fight and sue each other and demonstrate. It's very important that everyone leaves this room with the understanding what you saw today. And this is not an adversarial relationship here.
We definitely appreciate having you all here. I'd like us to please thank our panelists here as well. There are a lot of controversial issues, but having these gentlemen on stage is a good first step to getting a better understanding of how it works out. Lou Coletti will be signing copies of the Winston Churchill biography right outside, so just look out for that. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.